the text, we have the standard goods market model, where we know that consumption is a linear function of disposable income. Investment, government spending, and taxes are all taken as exogenously given in Chapter 3. We want to now look at one variant of the goods market model, in which what we're going to do is we're going to allow taxes to depend upon the level of income. So instead of taking taxes to be t is equal to t bar exogenously given, we're going to take taxes to be t is equal to t naught plus t1y. So we have partly lump sum taxes t naught and partly proportional taxes t1y, where t1 is our tax rate. And we'll still use the same consumption function, linear consumption function, which is a linear function of disposable income. And G and I are still going to be taken as exogenously given, and we're going to take a closed economy. So we're only going to vary one thing in the goods market model that is in the text, where now instead of taking taxes to be exogenously given, we're going to allow proportional income taxes. So in this economy, we want to solve for the equilibrium level of output or income. First, we'll solve for that, and then we'll compare the multipliers in both the models. So equilibrium output, we know in the goods market model is given by y is equal to z. Y represents output or income, and z represents demand for goods. Where we know z is the demand for goods is made up of c plus I plus g plus nx. Now what we need to do is we first need the demand function z. That's the first thing we need to do. We'll first find the demand function z, then we'll just equate it to y to find our equilibrium. I first need demand function z. Now in this case, what we see is that t is just equal to t naught plus t1y, right? So we're given this is taxes, right? Here we're given this t is equal to t naught plus t1y, right? So we have partly lump sum, which is the part t naught, and partly proportional taxes, which is t1y. Taxes, which is the part t1y, right? So we are partly lump sum and partly proportional taxes t1y. And we're given the same consumption function as before. C is equal to c naught plus c1 by d. C1 by d. Where we know disposable income is just like income minus taxes, c1y minus t. Right, and we can further now, what we can do is we can just plug in t over here. We can simplify this consumption function, and t we know is equal to t naught plus t1y. And now what we can do is we can further simplify this. So this becomes y minus t naught minus t1y. And then here's just an algebraic mistake to avoid is that do not write this as this 1 minus t naught plus t1y. This is wrong. Make sure you put the brackets over here like this, right? So don't just write it like when we're writing y minus t, so don't just write t like this because you need to put the brackets because this plus also becomes a minus when you use the brackets like this. So this is just wrong, so just keep that in mind. So yeah, so let's just simplify this a little further, where we combine like terms, like where we combine the terms which don't depend upon y and the terms that do depend upon y. So this just becomes c naught minus c1 t naught, and then this just becomes plus c1 1 minus t1y. So just simplified it by combining like terms, right? So we combine c naught and minus c1 t naught, and then this just becomes c1. We just factor it y, so it becomes c1 1 minus t1y. So this is our consumption function, right? So we have our consumption function here in our simplified form. We'll just simplify the consumption function by plugging in what x's are and then just combining like terms. And then we have I is equal to I bar, which is exogenously given to us. So we're taking it as given. Then we have G is equal to G bar, which is also exogenously given. And then we have Nx is 0. It's a closed economy. Right? So this is all that we're given. Now we can find our demand function Z. Now what Z is going to be is Z is going to be Okay, let's just erase this much and let's find z over here. So we need our demand function z. So now what we're going to do is we're going to find z, right? So we're going to just find z over here. We know z is going to be equal to c, and what is c given to us? C naught minus c1 t naught plus c1 1 minus ty. So it's equal to c plus I, which is I bar, plus G, which is G bar, and Nx is 0. So we found Z, right? So it's equal to C plus I plus G. Now let's just simplify this a bit and we'll write terms. We'll just combine like terms where we'll combine terms that don't depend upon y and terms that do depend upon y. So terms that don't depend upon y include C naught minus C1 T naught plus I bar plus G bar, and then this becomes plus C1 1 minus Ty. So written in this form, right? Now let's just erase this. Now the way we've written it, now you'll see this component that does not depend upon y is known as autonomous spending. Autonomous spending is part of demand that does not depend upon output or income y. In other words, demand when y is equal to 0. So we have an autonomous spending component and the part that does depend upon y is known as induced spending. So this is so this represents autonomous spending. Part of demand that does not depend on y. In other words, demand when y is 0. So now what we can do is once we have our demand function, it's very easy to find equilibrium y. Thus, equilibrium y is given as y is equal to z, and we just plug in the demand function c naught minus c1 t naught plus I bar plus G bar plus C1 1 minus Ty. We found a demand function, we put it equal to y, now we can find equilibrium y. From here, just make y the subject. So you take this term on the other side, so this becomes 1 minus C1 1 minus Ty is equal to C naught minus C1 T naught plus I bar plus G bar. Now this gives us equilibrium y as 1 by 1 minus C1 1 minus T C naught minus C1 T naught plus I bar plus G bar. So in this way, we can find equilibrium output in this model of the goods market where we allow taxes to depend upon y instead of taking taxes to be exogenously given.